Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee meeting. Today, we have, as you know, the consent agenda and our general agenda. We have 5 consent items and 4 general agenda items. Am I calling on a clerk to call the roll, or who's, that's what I'm saying. We should have had a practice round. We have here the committee, Community Development, Vice Chair Anna Scipio, Councilmember Mundy, and Councilmember Clark, and myself, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, as Chair. We also have other council members here, Councilmember McIntosh, Larson, and Burke. May we go ahead and begin with the first item? Do we have any consent items that need to be pulled?
Move approval of the consent items.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please note your vote. Thank you. It's unanimous. We will now go to the general agenda item with the city clerk's office, or Mr. Rao. Please call the first item.
Yes, ma'am. Item G1, consideration of items relating to the city council and committees meeting times referred from December 5th, 2022 city council meeting.
Thank you. You're going through it.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams, members of the City Council. The item before you this afternoon is a proposal to change the City Council meeting times as well as the committee meeting times. You know, as we're continuing to look for ways to to help the city be competitive in terms of attracting employees, that type of thing. One area that we did look at was the meeting times for City Council meetings. Did some research and looked at what other peer communities, when their meetings start, and you can see in the item there that the Forsyth County Commissioners, they hold their meetings at 2 o'clock. Greensboro City Council meetings at 5:30 with a work session at 2. High Point City Council at 5:30 with committees at 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. And then Guilford County has commissioner meetings at 5:30 p.m. with a work session at 2 p.m. So taking a look at that, one proposal was to look at changing the meeting time for the full council meetings, which occur on the 1st and 3rd Mondays of the month, change those from the current 7 p.m. to 6 p.m. And then to look at the committee meetings that occur on the 1st and 2nd, the second Monday and Tuesday of the month, move the Finance Committee and the Community Development, Housing, General Government Committee meetings from 4:30 p.m. to 2 p.m., and then the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meetings from 6 p.m. to 4 p.m. So the item before you today would amend City Code 2-33 to change the time for the full City Council meetings from 7 p.m. to 6 p.m., and then a resolution that would change the committee meetings as I described. In addition, there is a proposed schedule for 2023 that reflects potentially these changes.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee and or council members? Councilmember Mundy.
I don't think, Ben, thank you for explaining what we're trying to do. It's my understanding we don't have a hard and fast deadline that we're trying to meet. And I appreciate what other cities and counties are doing, but I don't think we have enough quantitative data from our citizens to make this call just yet. I talked to Frank in marketing yesterday about doing a survey, making sure that we have a good representation of different zip codes and evaluate that data before we make a decision. That's just my opinion.
Councilmember Clark and then Councilmember McIntosh.
I'm going to plagiarize some ideas that have been suggested to me. I don't have any trouble if we wanted to move the 7 o'clock meetings to 6:30, kind of compromise between the two. I'll credit Mr. McIntosh. He suggested, we have two committees that have a lot more volume than the other two. And to keep finance and we maybe go them at 4 versus 4:30, and general government at 4, but then flip and put public works and public safety at 2 o'clock, so that the two large meetings have only been moved up a half hour. And those are the meetings that most of the folks attend. But by moving the other meetings ahead of us, would certainly get staff out of here a lot earlier, because the meetings that start at 6 don't end until 7:30, whenever. And I do like the idea of having 2 hours between them, because I just think you need to be sure you got enough time in there that we're not rushing. So I would say 2 and 4, but flip them, and 6:30 versus 7. Thank you.
Councilman McIntosh.
Yeah, you stole my thunder there, but the other thing is that when I do my public outreach meetings, I schedule them at 5:30, and the response that I get from citizens is that they prefer that earlier versus going home, taking their shoes off, having a little dinner, and having to go back out of the house. That seems to be an impediment to people to get back out to another meeting. Whereas at 5:30, and I'm not recommending 5:30, I think 6 o'clock is a better option. But at 6 o'clock, you can hang out, work a little bit later, and then just go straight to a meeting and then go home and be done. So, I mean, my preference would be for 6 o'clock. I think that will help actually get more people into the chambers for a full council meeting.
Councilmember Larson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm not sure who we're doing this for, if we're doing it for staff and for city council members, or whether we're doing it for the public. It seems to me that moving it into the dinner hour at 6 o'clock is maybe problematic. If it's 6 o'clock and not 6:30, I was interested that you said 6:30. I wonder if that is something different from what I...
Just a compromise between the two.
Well, and then mid-afternoon, the 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock meetings, of course, are during the workday. If you're employed and you have a job and you have to leave there, everybody knows that basically most of the work is conducted in city committee work. And if you have a sincere interest in this, attending committees is rather important. So that means that you've got to interrupt your day and your work day and attend that. I think from the optics of this, from a public perspective, are not particularly attractive, in the sense that we're really restricting public participation in a way that we probably shouldn't be doing. I would agree with Councilmember Kevin Monday that perhaps we ought to do a little public research on this before we commit to something that maybe will not be received very well from the public perspective view. So I want to go very cautious on this. It's possible that a 6:30 meeting for the general meeting for council may be acceptable. Mid-afternoon is more problematic to me, because I just think it's going to be impossible for anybody to attend this if you have a working schedule.
Thank you. You finished, Councilmember Larson? Councilmember Monday.
Just were you finished, John?
I'm sorry, yes, I'm not a voting member of this committee, so I'll just give you an idea of what's going to happen in January.
Just a thought in the way of follow-up. Most of our committee meetings are not public hearings with public input. So if it's, as far as keeping abreast of what's happening, there's always the option of watching them later. And it may be that when we do have committee meetings where there is a need for public input, we could adjust times as needed. But really, I think when we talk about public input, we're talking about the full committee, the full council.
Councilmember Scipio?
Question.
Councilmember Clark?
One of the most contentious meetings is the planning. When do they meet?
4:30?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about big crowds when you talk about zoning issues, and that's at 4:30. I'm looking at Mr. King. How are the attendance at those meetings, if I may ask? I've watched some on TV, but I've never been.
Yeah, so Councilmember Clark, I would say the attendance is still robust, and you may remember at one point, the planning board actually had a consideration of changing their time. They used to meet at 2 o'clock, and they had a similar discussion about what an appropriate time was, and they settled at 4:30 because their agendas are so long.
Yep.
If you pushed them back, then you're there into the wee hours of the night, and that's not good for the public either. So they settled on 4:30, and we've had that for probably at least 10-ish years at least.
And you have large crowds at times, very large.
It's very similar to what you see here. I mean, take the Somerset zoning case, for example, that we've seen recently. I would say the crowd at planning board is probably similar to what you saw here.
Thank you, sir.
Well, Councilman McIntosh.
Yes, because we are so, I mean, you can pull up YouTube and watch us any time of the day or night. You can watch us live, you can watch us 5 minutes after we're done, halfway through when we're done. So we're not meeting behind closed doors. I think if there's an item that you can't be at a meeting for and you watch it on TV after the meeting, you know, we're accessible. People call us, people email us, we get input. And there's time between committee meetings and full council meetings for you to reach out and be heard. And we witness that all the time, and most often probably from people who are not at the meeting. So, I mean, I don't know what it really buys in terms of participation. I don't know what it really suppresses in terms of public visibility to hold them earlier in the day. So that's my personal opinion.
I think one of the things we have to keep in mind, whether we want to or not, is the new world of work and the new world of ensuring that your employees are not put in situations where they have a life too. And we all found that out as we were going into COVID, and as there was COVID, people were at home with their families, just like most people do. I think that with the resourcing issues that all cities have right now, I think it's imperative that we find a win-win for this. And I'm not putting it on the staff, I put it on our council as well. You know, we can, at the end of the day, I think we need to hold this again and get some feedback, but we also need to be able to present some recommendations to the public when they're looking to decide what is the best option. One, if you were an employer and your job mandates that you are there as a salaried person, I've been there, that you got to be there from 6:30 in the morning until 6:30 at night. And this is not an 8-hour shift. This is because our management, they want me to be there. They say I have to be there, but it didn't make me a happy camper either. I think we need to find the win-win to make this okay. And when people want to say, when I would tell people, and most of you know what time our council meetings are when I'm traveling across the country, they are surprised that our council meetings are at 7 o'clock at night. They are surprised that our committee meetings are 4:30 in the afternoon. Again, if you look at the county commissioner, my thing is that everybody's pressing us about what we're doing. Then how do y'all find the time to go to the county commission? Maybe that's why they kind of do what they do. Anyway, but I need us, Mr. Rao, and committee and council, I think we need to pull up on this. Again, I am concerned about the citizens having their input, but I'm also concerned about our staff that are, and I know some people have said, you can't use that as an excuse. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Just like policing, yes, we can. If staff is here from 6:30 in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, come on, people. That is unrealistic. The council, my suggestion to us as well, that we pull this, and I'm gonna call on you, Councilmember Scipio. I've been on this council 13 years. The first 10 years plus, council meetings, we were in and out. Our agendas were long. We only had special meetings where we added time if we needed it, whether it was for the budget or whether it was for some housing issues that we had to get through. My suggestion to council is we now need to do our homework a little better. When we come to committee meetings and we come to council meetings and we have a litany of questions, a litany of comments, a litany of conversation, they have to be here with us until we want to go home. If you come prepared, you get your agenda on Thursday. You got Thursday evening, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday morning, to text, email, call, come downtown, visit. But you got ample time to answer all of your questions. If it's a pressing issue, I got that. If it's a contentious issue, I got that too. But we should not be in these meetings to 9 o'clock at night or after. We didn't get up at 6 or whatever when they got up. It's not fair. And I believe, just like I said, you have to treat people, you have to value people, you have to respect their being parents and wives, husbands, partners, their children. We have to respect that. And anybody that got a problem with that, in the new world of work, we have to work around to make this work for our employees, their families. We want to talk about how we thank their families. Oh, thank you. The families are saying, well, they ain't never here. We can fix this. But right now, Councilmember Scipio, comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I on? Okay, thank you. Actually, whatever time we meet, council members are going to be here.
Thank you.
Because that's our role, to be here, whatever time we have to meet. To me, there are issues of respecting staff time, and I certainly believe we need to respect their time, their input. And yes, we can do that Thursdays through meeting time, and most of us do that. The persons that must think about, though, are our citizens. How are they going to give us feedback on these issues? And I believe we learned that during COVID, when we couldn't meet in person. We've got so many emails, so many texts, and when issues are vital to the community lets us know. So the time that we spend in meeting is very important for all of us to consider, and I have no problem with having them earlier, because when people feel passionate about something, they will get in touch with us. They always do. And so I think if you like to hold it in committee, that's one thing, but I do like the fact of flipping the two committees that have very small attendance to the earlier time, and then those that have a lot of outpouring and concerns, the heavier ones for the later time. But the other thing I really want us to consider is that we just don't give the public time for input at our committees. The decision tends to come to us, and then there's only one time with the council meeting that we have a public comment section. So for me, I think it's a lot more important to give the public some time at those committee meetings to give us some feedback. So that's my 2 cents on it, and Mr. Clark has another comment.
Councilmember Clark.
In the interest of time, may I suggest we hold this in committee and over the next 30 days poll the 8 council members to see if we can come up with some type of consensus?
Committee, do you have an issue with us holding this?
No.
I think it's a wise choice.
All of the committee has agreed to holding this in committee. All right, thank you, Mr. Rao. Next item, please.
Item G2, ordinance amending Chapter 9 of the Unified Development Ordinances to increase parking flexibility for restaurant uses in older, non-conforming buildings within the city's urban neighborhoods.
Mr. Murphy.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem,
I
members
don't
of
have
the
my
committee and
cheat sheet,
council.
but I know it's you.
Well, but that's why I'm getting up, because I'm not going to give the presentation. I want to introduce Elizabeth Collier on our staff, who's a project planner, and she'll give you the presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams and members of
And
the
you're
community.
speaking the mic.
Sorry. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams and members of, council members and committee members. My name is Elizabeth Collier. Thank you for the introduction, Chris. We're presenting UDO CC19. The petitioner is the Planning and Development Services staff. The request is to amend Chapter 9 nonconformities of the UDO to revise off-street parking requirements for restaurant uses in older buildings in GMAs 1 and 2. A little bit of background on this text amendment. In 2006, UDO 160 was approved, and that provided greater flexibility for changes of use in older non-residential buildings. And that excluded, though, restaurant uses. The provisions allow changes of use to occur in buildings constructed prior to 1968 in the county and 1988 in the city without any requirements for additional off-street parking. And the restaurant uses and electronic sweepstakes, which we're not talking about tonight, we're still required to comply with the current UDO standards or seek an elected body special use permit. And these uses, the restaurant uses were excluded due to concerns that parking might flow into adjoining neighborhoods. Staff analysis on this is that many businesses are already located within older buildings that are non-conforming to off-street parking standards. Since 2006, when the standards were changed for other uses, we've only had 7 special use permits for restaurant uses requested, and all of those have been approved. And 4 of those 7 parking exemptions were just requested since August of 2020, and that is sort of showing increased interest in readapting and reusing buildings in the city's urban core in GMAs 1 and 2. So the text amendment, in summary, the proposed text amendment would revise the UDO to remove the requirement for that elected body special use permit for a reduction in off-street parking for restaurant uses in these older neighborhoods. Any existing parking on site would have to be retained, of course. We believe the proposed language will simplify the approval process for any applicants wishing to establish a restaurant use within GMAs 1 and 2. And this would also promote more adaptive reuse of these buildings. We don't anticipate any significant negative effects of this text amendment due to the fact that since 2006, staff has not been made aware of any issues regarding the parking in neighborhoods. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Collier. Councilmember Clark.
When we say reduced, how much are we going to reduce it? Could you take an office building that maybe they require 50 spaces, or do we have a percent we're going to go down? How are you going to do that?
So for office buildings, for office uses, they can change uses within these buildings without any requirement for parking at all, as long as they meet the criteria of having been built before 1988, if they're in the city, and are in GMAs 1 or 2.
Well, the question is, whatever the requirement is under the current ordinances, if we're going to allow them to have a reduced number, how much are we going to reduce it?
So it's site-specific, so if the site has 25 parking spaces, they are not allowed to reduce the number of parking spaces on site for any use. The site cannot become less conforming than it is already.
Okay, Mr. Murphy, maybe you can.
I was going to say, the answer to the question is essentially in GMA 1 and 2, currently all uses except for restaurant with and without drive-through, there is no parking requirement in GMA 2 in a building built for non-residential purposes. We're going to extend that to restaurants as well. So let's say you have a 3,000 square foot building and you have no parking on your site. Currently, you either have to provide the parking, which if there's not any parking on site, nowhere to put any, you either can't do the use or you have to come to the elected body for a special use permit. So what we're going to do is essentially say there is no parking requirement for these buildings within GMAs 1 and 2.
But you can't get rid of what you got.
But you can't get rid of what you have, correct?
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember McIntosh and then Councilmember Larson.
I think this UDO should be called CC19 Northwest Ward because almost all the cases are in the Northwest Ward, and it's in older commercial areas. that are now kind of being rediscovered and repurposed. And typically when they come to us, I always feel like my hands are tied, that I really don't have any ability, because it's all pro forma based on what the UDO is. And so we sit here as a council and we hear them and we say, okay, given how we're allowed to react to this, then we just react that way and we approve them. And I can't think of a case yet where one has been approved in fairly intensive areas, West End Boulevard and Broad Street and then 4th and Brookstown. Those are areas that these changes have occurred in, and they work themselves out. And typically, if neighborhoods do have a problem with parking, there's a permit parking process that allows the neighborhoods to deal with that, to exclude the commercial parking from occurring within their boundaries. So I'm all for this.
Councilmember Larson, then Councilmember Scipio.
So we're getting ready to designate a downtown historic district, the National Register District as historic. Would you define an older commercial building for me by age?
So within the city, an older commercial building is any building that was constructed prior to, it's a date in March in 1988.
That's 72 years old.
Built in 1988, so it'd be 30,
34.
34 years old.
It's 34, and the reason why that date was chosen is because that's when parking standards were put into the UDO. There were no parking standards in the zoning ordinance for minimum parking requirements until 1988.
Okay, so it's based on.
So that's where we came up with that March of 88 date. That's the first time that there were any comprehensive parking standards in the ordinance. So whenever we say older buildings, it's basically for any non-residential structure built prior to 1988, because again, that's when those parking standards were
It
put
basically
in.
puts everything on an even playing field.
Correct.
Councilmember Scipio.
One of the attachments, Exhibit A, showed site locations. Are these the only locations that would be impacted by this ordinance? Are there none out in Ardmore or farther out in any of our older neighborhoods?
Thank you, Councilmember Scipio. The map that you're referring to shows the locations of previously approved special use permits for parking exemptions. So there have only been 7 since 2006.
But we don't know if there are other locations in the city that this might impact, like on Walltown Street.
Oh, there's plenty of commercial buildings that would be eligible to apply if someone wanted to do so and obtain building permits or whatever, proper approvals. Today, they have to go through the elected body process, but if we change that, if you all change that, then they can just come in with their building permits, and it's a much smoother process for the applicant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a motion?
I'd like to move that we approve item number G2.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. May we have the vote, please? And G2 passes unanimously. Next item, please.
Item G3, information on proposed city contribution to pre-K initiatives. Good afternoon again, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams, members of the City Council. As part of the 2021-22 budget, the Mayor and Council appropriated $1.35 million to fund several crime prevention initiatives, which included $350,000 for pre-K initiatives. In September of 2021, the Mayor and Council approved the use of American Rescue Plan Act funds for the crime prevention plan. Earlier that year, in 2021, the Mayor and Council, in coordination with the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners and the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools Board of Education, approved a resolution to form the Early Childhood Education Task Force to lead the community in developing a plan to ensure that all Forsyth County's children have access to high-quality pre-K programs. The pre-K priority, which did work preceding the work of this task force, has supported the work of the task force. Back in June of 2021, the task force began meeting, and they presented their recommendations here a couple months ago in November. I'd like to recognize Leslie Mullenix, who's with the Pre-K Priority, who will present information about a proposed city contribution to further one of the recommendations of the Early Childhood Education Task Force. This is an information item, so we will receive any feedback or any questions that you have, and then potentially bring an action item back in the future.
Thank you. Would you state your name and address, please?
Sure. My name's Leslie Mullenix. My address is 2016 Gaston Street, Ardmore neighborhood.
And be sure to talk into the mic.
Okay. Leslie Mullenix, 2016 Gaston Street, Winston-Salem. Proud member of Ardmore community. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tempore and committee members and all council folks. I am so proud to be before you all. Some of you have already been serving in a capacity to support this, and I appreciate that. Councilwoman Burke, also Councilwoman Dee Dee Adams, I appreciate all of the things that you've done to get us to this point, so thank you. So I do want to give you guys a little bit of context before we jump into what we're talking about and proposing for you all. Hopefully you had a chance to look over the information that was given in terms of the information item and the proposal, but I do think it's important to have some history and context behind why we are feeling very worthy about receiving this money from the city. Very briefly, 2014 was when this Pre-K Priority Initiative began. It was a group of about 12 early education leaders here in the city of Winston-Salem, representing the county. And they were looking at what was going on in other metro counties across North Carolina and seeing that universal pre-K was on the rise. And they said, if we want to continue having folks move to Winston-Salem, we need to do something about the number of children who are not in high-quality pre-K. So it was a vision that began with that small group in 2014. Moving into, you'll see 2015 to 2020, there was a communication and public education campaign that was helped along with our local advertising agency, M Creative. You probably are very familiar with them. They've done great work in the community. And they really helped us try to get the general public to understand why pre-K is important. Even if your child is not 4, even if you're not a parent, it is important that all of our citizens understand how this affects the general public. And so we did that campaign. We also did a feasibility study. We said if we're going to ask people for money, we have to be able to show what we have already, what's working, what's not, and know what the gaps are. So we did a feasibility study with Foresight Futures, another analytics group here locally, that helped us understand our current landscape. And then we built an equity case statement. After everything that happened in 2020 with the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, we said we really need to hone in on what we're missing from an equity standpoint and what our children are missing. So we did an equity case statement around pre-K as well. All of those things are on our website. We'd love for you to go read those reports. But more importantly, moving to now, what has happened was that the Early Childhood Task Force that Ben mentioned to you, they really came alongside us. That was the turning point when we got the city involved, when we got the county involved, and the Winston-Salem Forsyth County School Board involved, and they said, yes, we can do this. Let's start putting some time and energy into how these recommendations can be lived out. So we were very happy at the end of that one-year task force. It coincided with an opportunity to apply for the ARPA grants, the American Rescue Plan Act Fund. And so we did that. We were luckily given $3.7 million. We are very fortunate, and we have Dr. Lewis Finney here today from Smart Start. They agreed on the Pre-K Priorities' behalf to champion and be that fiduciary recipient of that, and we are in the planning stages of helping move that along to where it will. I'm going to talk about how you guys can also help support that with these funds. But before I get there, I just want you to take a quick look at this. It's a lot of words on the page. I'm not going to go over all of it. But what it does is it really proves the case, makes the case that Mayor Pro Tempore has already told, I think this group is the reason why she brought this forward, is something that is crucial to crime prevention is having children have a good start as they enter school. And this is short-term, this shows long-term, and then it actually shows the overall economic benefits that come from both the short and long-term. And if you'll allow me real quickly, I want to read from, there's a summary that's our executive summary of a report that was put out in 2021 from the Council for Strong America and Fight Crime, Invest in Kids, these two national bodies, bipartisan bodies. And it's made up of law enforcement from all across the country. And the introductory portion is what I want to read to you. It says, while no child is destined at birth to end up incarcerated, the road to criminal behavior is paved with such challenges as poverty, childhood abuse and neglect, parenting challenges, inadequate preparation for school, unaddressed behavior problems, poor academic performance, and ultimately dropping out of school and engaging in crime. So we see that pathway that can happen. And what these folks are doing is making the case that pre-K, while not a silver bullet, is something that can really help families and help children avoid that pathway into crime. It breaks that prison pipeline. So with that, establishing a high-quality pre-K foundation is what that $3.7 million is going to start doing. We're going to focus on 30 classrooms that are already currently in the landscape. It will affect 540 children, their families, 60 teachers, and then the various sites that will be impacted across those classrooms. Currently, what we're planning for that cohort is 4 of them will be in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County schools. 4 of those will be in Head Start classrooms, Head Start centers. Then there will be 8 classrooms in the community that are NC pre-K funded. And then there will be 14 private or / independent classrooms that are community centers or they're independent centers in the community that are offering childcare. And the reason that we split it up like this, again, is to look from a place of equity. We know that Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Schools and Head Start get the most funding from federal resources. We know that NC Pre-K gets Smart Start and the funding from the state for NC Pre-K. And we know that the 14 that we're going to help are currently getting nothing. They may be getting some independently, they may be getting parent vouchers, but that doesn't mean that the school itself is getting resources. And so we really wanted to focus the most of the classroom dollars in areas that are currently not getting that support. I won't go through all of this, but again, what this does is I really want to emphasize here that this work is being done by a group of people that are committed to working together and moving outside of the siloed work that they typically, are forced to do based on their funding. So we're trying to look at maximizing the strengths of all of these folks coming together to do this work and synergize their efforts and reduce the duplication that we know happens a lot in education and then different nonprofits. So we're looking to work together, make equity a focus, and also really make sure that families are at the center of this and they have a voice at the table and they help in making policy and understanding what these proposals are about. Again, I won't go into all this, but I just wanted to show you that the framework that we're talking about would have about 5 different folks involved across, I say folks, different agencies involved giving these programmatic services, and these are the pieces of that. So we'll be working alongside 5 or 6 different groups to deliver this program. So coming to you guys, we are asking for that $350,000 to be broken up into these 5 quadrants. The top one, the most, is 126,406, and I'm going to go through the rest of these with a little bit more detail. So the first one, that largest one, is to support the full program of the 2-year cohort. When we had the the award of $3.7 million from the county. There was a shortfall of about 126 that we had budgeted for. And so there are some there are some crucial items that would fall off of our budget if we were not able to have the $126. So we were requesting that part of the money that you give would help offset that deficit in our budget, and that would be applied across all 30 classrooms. Secondly, we have $110,000 toward health and safety. This is something that would be primarily for the 14 private or independent classrooms, because typically those are the ones who do not have the funds to be able to do dental, vision screening, different kinds of mental health and physical assessments, and then also an environmental assessment of the actual classroom and the facility. So those would go into helping raise the bar for them and getting those equitable services that are in a lot of the publicly funded classrooms already. $63,000 would then also be allocated towards the curriculum and the formative assessment tools. Those sound, like, okay, what are we talking about? Well, the curriculum is very important, and because it needs to be, again, equitable with all the other things that we're doing in Head Start and NC Pre-K and at the school system, they all use a specific curriculum called creative curriculum, and it's about the whole child approach so that it makes sure that it's addressing all the social emotional, the literacy, all of the math components. It's really a great curriculum, but it takes money to get that creative curriculum. Again, this would help that 14 classrooms be able to afford that. Also, the assessment tools are the things that we'd be looking at with how are teachers doing with the interaction with the children that they're working with. Is there fidelity to the model of the curriculum that's being shared with the children? And then this is critical. This $39,000, that may not sound like a lot of money. It's going to go a long way for those 14 private classrooms that would be getting implementation support. So we're going to be asking them to raise their quality, and it's going to impact the way they run their center, and they're going to need some implementation support to put this into place. So that would afford our 14 centers a little over $2,500 a year. And again, that goes a long way for them. That makes a big difference. It doesn't go far enough, but it helps. I don't want you to think that is cheap. It's not. Data collection and integration is the last thing. It's $11,700 that we'd like to allocate towards that. Now, Ben told me, he's like, this is not something that's going to go over great with you guys because nobody wants to, data's not fun. Data's not, interesting. Well, I see you kind of went like this. Yeah. I'm with you. Data is important. And I think sometimes it is lost on when we talk about childcare, though, because people are like, no, we just need the services. But what we have found, and I'm glad you're shaking your heads, is we do have to have that data in order to prove why it is important and the outcomes show that the inputs are working. And one of the things that we've also found is we have a lot of good data, but it is, very siloed. And so part of what this would do would help streamline some of the data systems that we already have and make them talk to each other, and also help our, what we use in Head Start called Child Plus, and it collects data in a very streamlined fashion, and it would help these 26 classrooms also have that so that we could get streamlined data across those 2 years in the cohort. And with that, I'll take any questions. But hopefully that gives you a good overview of the $350,000, how we would put that to good use. And we do appreciate the consideration for giving that to the pre-K priority.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark.
Two questions and a comment. Are we talking about, I'm over here.
I'm sorry.
Are we talking about 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds or just 4-year-olds?
Just 4-year-olds.
Okay.
Yes.
Number two, which organization are you with?
I report into Family Services.
Family Services.
Mm-hmm. And I am sponsored by a grant from the Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust, the actual work of helping the pre-K priority.
Okay. Last one, and my children are probably your age.
They're very young then.
Yes, they are very young. I would like, and I don't know which organization can provide this, but how many 4-year-olds there are in the city or the county, however you keep it.
Well, we
And-
do,
let me
I'm
finish,
sorry.
please.
Yes.
And then how many are in a program and what programs are in, if they're in Head Start or schools or whatever, or private or whatever? My overall question is how many 4-year-olds are being served? Because what I hear from my side of town, and I represent the West Ward, is that they have a hard time finding these programs.
Yes.
So it's not just equity, it may be an equity issue all over town. So that would help me to know how many 4-year-olds there are and how many are in a good program.
Sure. We do know that year to year, pretty much with our feasibility study, we saw there's about 4,500 4-year-olds
4,500.
in the county.
Okay, that's fine.
I wish I had my pie chart that I could show you.
You can send it to me. That's
I can
fine.
send it to you, yeah. Because what it does is it is a good snapshot. It's an excellent question, and I think it's one that should be asked if you're giving someone money, so I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
if you could just send it to
Yeah.
one of our staff members.
I sure can. And I will tell you, it's broken down by public funding and then by people who are paying tuition payments. So
However
you
you
can
wanna
see
do it.
both. And I also mention to you that there is a dearth of pre-K and not only that, but childcare in pockets across the county, to your point, that we're having problems not only with a childcare center being located there, but also having staffing because the pay has been an issue. And pay is something that we are going to be, we are addressing that in the program that we're doing in our 2-year cohort.
Okay, thank you. You can send it to whatever staff person you deal with. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Scipio, and then Councilmember McIntosh.
Thank you very much for your behind-the-scenes sort of look at where our money's going. My biggest concern is, are we really reaching the children in our qualified census tracts? So, because they are the poorest, and oftentimes they may not know about what's available, or for some reason they can't be reached. So what I would like to know is, of all of the programs that's receiving this money that you spoke of, Winston-Salem County Classrooms, Head Start, the North Carolina Pre-K, and the 14 private independent classrooms, actually, how many children are we actually serving? And are they coming from our qualified census tracts? And you can provide that later.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councilmember McIntosh?
Yeah, when this hits the ground, this is going to be one of those 10-year overnight sensations, right? I mean, it's been a long time building. Bob Fikema, a friend of mine and a good friend of mine, is former CFO for Family Services, and he's been proselytizing for years about, it's like the housing thing, there's never enough money to do it all, but that doesn't mean you can't start somewhere and get boots on the ground and show some success and build on that success. So I'm excited to see this come about. And it's taken a bunch of people to be involved. There was no one organization that was going to get it across the line.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Mundy, and then Councilmember Burke.
I'm not sure if this
then
is a
Larson.
question or a comment, but on the heels of Councilmember Scipio's concerns, it seems like when we offer programs, whether it's job readiness or a program like this, I'm always concerned that the people who need it the most don't participate. And I would just encourage you to look beyond the 4-year-olds who are already in a program. How do we get into the neighborhoods where we need to pluck people out of their homes and get them in a program like this, because they are, in fact, the ones that are most at risk? I don't have the answer, but it is a concern.
Yes. Noted, and I agree. And there are some things that we're doing in that vein, and I'd be glad to talk further with you about that.
Councilmember Burke, and then Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, Leslie, for the presentation. I'm very happy to be part of all of this and to know where our city dollars are going. I appreciate every question that my colleagues on council have asked, because it is important to make sure that we're not missing any of the 4,500 4-year-olds that we have in our city. This work that we're doing to make sure that we are reaching all of the 4-year-olds is so critically important because it will determine the success of these kids as they go on through school. And reaching them early makes all the difference in the world. I know because I taught on the elementary level. I know because I taught reading. I know how critically important learning these skills early has to be. We have to make it a priority. And it will make a difference. So I just want to make sure that we are reaching every 4-year-old that we have in our city and in our county, and we should see the results on the other end. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Councilmember Larson.
Leslie, I think you're hearing from this council that we're very supportive of the pre-K program as a whole, and I got to say that generally, educational programming is the responsibility of the county, and yet we're playing in that sandbox with this, and I think we're all happy to be doing that. My observation is we've got 30 classrooms, we've got 540 students and 60 teachers. And that's a small piece of the pie of what the need actually is. Do you envision over this is a 2-year program that we're looking at, basically, the expenditure of this funding?
Yes, and the reason why is because of the ARPA guidelines,
Right.
and that the money has to be expended by that certain date.
Certain period of time.
Yeah, and we are asking the county to continue on with this funding and not just have a one-time thing with it. That is part of our proposal to them. Of course, that will probably depend on the evaluation and the outcomes.
For the 540 students that you list, is that a movable number? Is it based on enrollment in these various schools? You list 540 students as a study group, basically, that you're
Yes.
dealing with. Is that number fixed, or would that change with enrollment at the school?
No, it is fixed. It's based on the budget of what we can do. It would be 540 children across 30 classrooms. So that's about 17 to 18 children per classroom.
So those classroom enrollment numbers are firm enough that you feel comfortable that the 540 is solid?
Yes.
Well, I think my aspiration is I hope we can go way beyond this at some point and make it universal, which I think has been the goal a long time standing. And maybe the data that's developed out of this study will help us do that. But I think it's important that we move quickly as possible to get pre-K into our curriculum.
Agreed. And to your point, I think part of what we're understanding is this also gives us a realistic way to understand implementation and do it on a smaller scale as we start to try to scale it across the full spectrum, because it is a huge undertaking. If you look at anybody else who's done this, it's not an easy thing to do. Not only is the implementation a little bit overwhelming, but when you talk about the money it takes, and that's where we'll have to do more advocacy on our part, and that will be one of the things the pre-K priority continues to do in the next couple years.
I would emphasize what my colleagues are telling you, and that is the underserved populations of parts of this town need that attention, and hopefully they'll come out of this study with that data, relevant data to help us understand that challenge a little bit better.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know how happy I am. I know when I brought this to council during budget sessions, you know, I know the old adage was that we don't do education, but my council saw the need because the world is changing. And we can no longer be in our own lanes that this is what the state does, this is what the city does, this is what the county does. We always preach in collaboration and partnership, and we know now that we're going to have to partnership with everybody if we're going to get anything done. I remember when I got the call, the invite to be a part of the committee that put the task force together. And we met regularly. You know, Gloria Wisenhunt, a lot of us were on it. And to be able to craft, yes, with intentionality, that the members of the task force have to be diverse. It's got to be intentional. You got to have all the groups recommended: Latino, Hispanics, Asians, Black, poor, rich, white. It didn't matter because we had no handle on how we were going to do this. But I would like to tell the council, suggest that you read the county's recommendation submissions. That's part of the agenda package that's part of this item. It lists everything from things we discussed like pay. When you can't pay frontline workers of children, then they're not going to be there. Because if I'm only making $7 an hour and I can go over here at a fast food and make 12, I'm out. And we had to look at, for most of us, I never got to go to pre-K. I never had kindergarten, didn't have none of that. Family couldn't afford it. 7 kids living on Martin Luther King Claremont. But the thing was, back then, you had the neighborhood. My sister Rita, whose birthday was yesterday, she passed, but it was my sister Rita that set the chairs, the kitchen chairs, up on the back porch of 601 North Claremont and taught my twin sister and my cousin and I our ABCs, colors, reading, spelling, writing, in hopes that we would be ready to go to school, first grade at Skyland, and we were. I found it very interesting that these ma and pop type small agencies that you listed, they are great with what they've done and what they do, but we need to bring them up to speed to the quality system that is required in trying to educate 4-year-olds in pre-K, particularly in neighborhoods, because there's always in our neighborhoods a Miss Barr that raised, Ms. Councilmember Burke, that raised my nephews at her house in Morningside. There's always been somebody in the neighborhood that took the kids in because the parents and everybody else was at school or work, and they made it work. And for the council to take this bold step last year, I skipped all the way home in my car because I think right now we realize with ARPA and the impending issues in our communities that if we don't start with education, because it's key, if children don't have an equitable foundation to start from, to be successful, to have that opportunity, then what happens, happens. And I commend all of you, Smart Start, Pre-K, Priority, the county, social services, KB, the educators, everybody that was involved in the evolution of this task force. And I can tell you, I am here for you guys at any call or whatever you need, and I'm speaking to council. I'm sure they will be too once we get the data, and that was why the data was important, because we realized that people really don't know how this all shakes out, because they all got their data sites at the schools and the colleges and everywhere. Nobody, again, working together, Council Monday. So now we have an opportunity to 2 years, we'll have data, we'll be able to see what works and what doesn't and what we got to tweak. And hopefully the city, the county, the state, and the feds, that we will all continue to work together to ensure every child has a quality education. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Pro Tem Adams.
Councilmember Scipio.
I just have a question on what next. This was an information item. Is there going to be an action item at some point, and at what point will that be?
Yes, ma'am, Councilmember Scipio. I think that I'll work with Leslie on responding to your questions, but we'll bring this back in January as an action item.
Okay, at the second meeting?
Yes,
the
ma'am.
second council meeting? Or to the committee?
It'll come back to committee.
To committee, and then for the
we'll,
council.
if you recommend it, we'll go to full council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. Next item, please.
Item G4, information on the urban heat island mapping campaign opportunity.
Welcome, Ms. Poplawski.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, committee members, and members of the City Council. I am here tonight to discuss a grant opportunity that our office is pursuing. This is an opportunity from the National Integrated Heat Health Information System in partnership with numerous other agencies at the federal level. And there is no matching funds required. And we have already started working to create and build partnerships for this. This will be very dependent on these partnerships if we were to receive this award. The gist of this opportunity is that it will involve significant volunteer work from members of our community, whoever would like to sign up to do this. It requires members of the community to drive around with sensors and measure on the hottest day of the year or whereabouts how hot various parts of the city will be. This grant would cover up to 100 square miles, so that is logistically just about the entire city. So because this also does involve environmental justice and social vulnerability as part of the Justice 40 initiative, we will be able to cover those underserved and qualified census tract areas with this. And we're very excited. We do have Map Forsyth on board with us. We also have Piedmont Environmental Alliance, who is interested in helping, especially with the volunteer aspect, as well as our Community Sustainability Program Committee. And that's just the beginning. We are working to continue to find agencies and other organizations in the community that would be interested in partnering. But that's the gist of this. We're very excited about that. And the deadline is Friday, so hopefully by the end of January, we will be notified one way or the other.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, that's all of the agenda. Councilmember Mundy.
This is not pertaining to anything on the agenda, but I have a question. I don't know where to direct it. I'm saying it's housing because I had a conversation with someone as we left the groundbreaking for choice neighborhoods, with the concern that some of the folks in that neighborhood and the surrounding neighborhoods who most need that job readiness training are not hearing about it and are not coming to the table to be trained. And I don't know if that's a function of coming up, if it's a staff function to get the word out there. The folks who need to know probably aren't reading the Winston-Salem Journal. So I'm going to put that on someone's plate, and I don't know whose plate to put it on.
Ms. Garrity.
Good evening, Chairman, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the City Council, Councilmember Mundy. We actually, several council members, including Mayor Pro Tem Adams, heard the same complaints, as well as members of the Housing Authority. At her request, at Mayor Pro Tem's request, I've already reached out to Kevin Cheshire, who's the head of the Housing Authority. They're putting together a response on both their MWB efforts, as well as HUD requires Section 3 job training. There are requirements, specific requirements that are designed to make sure that they reach out and use local minority citizens as much as possible. So he's putting together that response. I have not seen it yet, but we will forward it to everyone on council. That Hawes is the lead on it, not the city, but we obviously are a major funder.
Great, thank you, and I'm really glad we're trying to address that issue.
Yes, and just like the city manager said, we are a major partner, and therefore we have a responsibility also. And whatever we find out, if it has an opportunity for us to jump in and create the process of how we think the marketing and whatever, the job fairs or the training, then we need to be prepared to do that. Is that right, Mr. City Manager?
Absolutely. We obviously have a lot more resources to do that than the Housing Authority has, so we'll be working with them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, General Government Committee is adjourned.
Public Works will meet at 6 o'clock.